Good morning to everyone joining us across the country on the presentation entitled Fake Jews, an overview of the extreme Black Hebrew Israelites. My name is Norwin Marins. I'm a representative of the FJMC Midwest region in the Chicago area. And our presentation this morning will be given by Emily Thompson. She's the Associate Director in the Research Department at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, based in snowy Southern California. This is the first time this presentation is being given anywhere. And Emily will examine the worldview, ideology, and rhetoric of extremist elements in the Black Hebrew Israelite movement that is prevalent today and spreading anti-Jewish hate, like some white extremist movements, literally presenting Jews as the devil, spawning targeted violence, mayhem, and even murder of Jews. As a matter of housekeeping, I would ask that everyone mute themselves at this time, other than obviously our speaker and myself. There is an opportunity, if you have questions, to place them in the chat, and we will be going through those after the presentation. And if you find that this program is particularly timely, which obviously it is to many, please let us know through the FJMC, and we can make arrangements for the Wiesenthal Center to present in your respective geographic area. So with that, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Emily Thompson.
Hi, good morning, everyone from snowy California. As Norwin said, thank you very much for having me this morning. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share this research with you all. So thank you to Norwin and the FJMC for inviting me and hosting me. As Norwin said, I'm the Associate Director for the Simon Wiesenthal Center Research Department. I've been at the Simon Wiesenthal Center for about 9 years now. You might be able to guess I'm originally from London in the UK, came over to intern at the Wiesenthal Center and never went home. So I want to just give you a warning up front that some of the content that I'm going to share today is harmful and hateful in nature. So if at any point you feel like this is not the presentation for you, I won't be offended. That's totally fine. Feel free to step away or switch me off. That's okay with me. So before we dive into the meat of the presentation, I wanted to just introduce the organizations that I'm representing today. If you're not familiar, the Simon Wiesenthal Center is a Jewish global human rights organization researching the Holocaust and hate in a historic and a contemporary context. We work to confront anti-Semitism, hate, and terrorism, promote human rights and dignity, stand with Israel, defend the safety of Jewish people worldwide, and teach the lessons of the Holocaust for future generations. We have a constituency of about 400,000 households across the United States, and we're an accredited NGO at organizations like the UN, UNESCO, and the Latin American Parliament. We have offices across the US too, one in Chicago, hence this presentation, also New York City, as well as internationally in Canada, Buenos Aires, Israel, and Paris. We have an educational arm physically located here in Los Angeles, California, which was founded in 1993, which is the Museum of Tolerance. And we've served over 7 million visitors since opening 30 years ago. We work primarily with students, but we also provide training and programs for the general public, teachers, administrators, law enforcement, and professional organizations. If you ever have the opportunity to come and visit in person, we have exhibits covering things like the history of the Holocaust, contemporary human rights issues, the story of Anne Frank, and the story of immigration to America. We also have regular Holocaust survivor speakers and others, including former extremists and civil rights leaders who share their experiences with our audiences. So the Simon Wiesenthal Research Department, our main project that we focus on is delightfully called Digital Terrorism and Hate. This image on the screen is the upcoming cover for our 2023 release, which will be in Chicago and New York City in just a couple of weeks. This is the 25th annual edition of our project, and you can visit it at digitalhate.net. It's also available as a smartphone app. So before we dive into the extreme Black Hebrew Israelites today, I thought it would be helpful to give you an overview of some of the lowlights of what we're about to share in the next couple of weeks. Our project is expansive. It covers a wide variety of the types of hate that exist on the internet, in particular anti-Semitism, anti-Islamic content, anti-LGBTQ material, anti-immigrant hate, and many, many more. And we really use this project to shine a light on the way that extremists utilize the internet to spread their beliefs. We do this not to glorify or illuminate what they're doing for anyone, but people who need to know about this threat in more detail. So groups such as yourselves, law enforcement, and we work closely with social media platforms. Much of what we focused on in the past year has really been looking at the extremist far-right movement and ideology known as accelerationism. We have groups and individuals that are motivated by white supremacist and neo-Nazi beliefs working together on messaging apps like Telegram to spread publications like the ones you can see on the screen. These provide how-to guides on building homemade explosives, destroying critical infrastructure, and targeting minority groups to hasten the collapse of society to bring about a race war, which these individuals believe the so-called white race would be victorious in. We've also been monitoring the glorification of individuals who have committed mass shootings or murders, again motivated by white supremacist or neo-Nazi beliefs. The network of Telegram channels that share the content that I just showed you is called Terragram. And this is an image that they released at the end of last year, heralding two individuals as saints. On the left, you have Peyton Gendron, who murdered 10 African Americans at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. And then Juraj Krajcik, who's actually a Slovakian, who targeted and killed 2 people outside an LGBTQ bar in Slovakia. And these young men are held up as the future of the movement and a model to follow. We've also seen the spread of hateful and harmful content on TikTok. Those of you with grandchildren, children may be familiar with this in the past couple of years. It's a video sharing platform that now has over 1 billion users and is particularly popular with the under 18 audience. Unfortunately, even there, we found content glorifying other mass shooters like John Earnest, who you see on the left, who killed 1 person at a synagogue down in San Diego in 2019. And pieces of Brenton Tarrant's live stream attack on 51 Muslims at 2 mosques in New Zealand in 2019. This can be found on TikTok, where they do have significant policies and mechanisms in place to remove this content. But unfortunately, we're still seeing it's being proliferated on this platform because extremists are innovators and clever to work around the systems that are put in place. So we are working closely with TikTok to expose the way their platform is being exploited and to help them build their capacity to deal with this type of material. The Goyim Defense League may be an organization that you might be familiar with. In recent months, they've made headlines over the past year for pulling numerous anti-Semitic stunts like banner drops on freeways, leaving flyers in neighborhoods, and something called their U-Holocaust campaign, obviously a play on the word U-Haul and Holocaust, where they put anti-Semitic signs on U-Haul vans and drive around cities filming people's reactions, verbally abusing Jewish people. You can see on the left here one of their vans at a hotel in Beverly Hills, accompanied by some men dressed like Nazi brown shirts, and a sample of a flyer found in cities across the US targeting Jewish people, claiming that they invented COVID-19 and are simultaneously financially profiting from it. Roblox is another world-building gaming platform that's very popular with preteens. that unfortunately we've seen exploited by extremists to build replicas of horrific incidents like the Christchurch mosque shooting, the 1990s siege on Waco, the Jersey City kosher market attack, and the Tree of Life Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. And again, whilst Roblox works hard to remove this content, the extremists are constantly adapting their tactics to evade moderation. On the right, you can see an avatar dressed as the New Zealand mosque shooter. And on the left, we have a screenshot of some individuals potentially utilizing Roblox as a meeting space under the auspices of a group called Atomwaffen Division, a US neo-Nazi group linked to at least 5 murders. Our research also extends beyond North America. We've tracked a large number of Telegram channels promoting anti-Semitism in Russia. This image comes from a Russian language Telegram channel called the Anti-Jew Project. It's got over 2,400 subscribers, and it promotes violent anti-Semitism. It blames Jews, claiming they manufactured the war in Ukraine, and that Jews need to be killed and synagogues need to be burned. And finally, the mapping project, which was launched in June 2022, is an interactive map providing the locations and addresses of approximately 500 organizations, individuals, companies, universities, and government entities across Massachusetts that the group deems to be connected with Israel in some way. They allege that all these entities are interlinked, as you can see from this map, and that they are responsible for what they consider to be harmful practices such as policing, US imperialism, and the so-called colonization of Palestine. They even have provided addresses of synagogues and Jewish schools, accusing them of supporting ethnic cleansing and genocide. So that gives you a upbeat example of some of the content that you'll find in our project. As I mentioned, you can access it at our website, digitalhate.net, and it's also available as a smartphone app. Surprisingly, it's the only one called Digital Terrorism and Hate on the App Store, both for Apple and Android. If anyone has any questions about any of that, I'm happy to answer towards the end of this presentation. And again, we do this research not just for the sake of looking at the content, but really to work with the agencies who are fighting back against this kind of material. But today we're going to turn our attention to a small sect of people known as the extreme Black Hebrew Israelites. This is based on a Simon Wiesenthal Center research report that we released in December 2022. And this report and others like it, you can find at wiesenthal.com/SWC reports. I mentioned a platform called Telegram. We have a lengthy piece about that platform and how it was exploited by extremists. We also have content on individuals like Louis Farrakhan and Holocaust denial. So plenty of things to enjoy at a later date. Full disclaimer for this presentation, I am presenting to a Jewish group today. I myself am not Jewish. I am not a biblical scholar. My expertise is in manifestations of hate online and how it impacts our communities. So I want to apologize in advance if I make any errors. But what I'd like to do is really hold the questions to the end, because so much of this content is all interconnected. So I'd like for you to see it all in its entirety, and then I'll leave plenty of time at the end for a discussion. Also, you're highly likely to disagree with much, if not all, of what the individuals I'm about to show believe. But the purpose of this presentation is to really illustrate their claims and how it poses a threat to our Jewish communities. Rather than focusing on debunking them or explaining whilst they're wrong, we can start from a point of understanding that what they promote in the extreme end of this spectrum is not acceptable. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. So it's also important to note that this group is not monolithic. So it exists on a diverse spectrum of beliefs and practices, and many sects that consider themselves Black Hebrew Israelites exist in harmony with other groups who identify as Jewish. So we'll start with the overall context, but then we're going to explore specifically the radical extreme subgroup that we should not confuse with Black Jews or other Jews of color. But this is a very specific section of the society that believes very specific things. So why are we even talking about this extreme Black Hebrew Israelite movement? How did it come to the forefront? Well, you may recall, unless you were in some sort of media blackout during October and November of 2022, that the rap artist and social media influencer Ye, formerly Kanye West, tweeted out anti-Semitic attacks and participated in multiple media appearances targeting the Jewish people. An NBA player called Kyrie Irving also tweeted out a link to an anti-Jewish film called Hebrews to Negroes, which we'll talk about. Both of these actions really thrust this movement into the national spotlight. So you can see on the screen here Kanye West's tweet from October 2022, where he claims that he's going to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. But then he goes on to claim is that he can't be anti-Semitic because Black people are Jewish also. So let's dive into that and try and understand where this general idea of Black Hebrew Israelites came from, specifically in the United States. It really began in the 1800s with a man called Bishop William Saunders Crowdy, who was actually born into slavery in Maryland in 1847. In the 1890s, he founded something called the Church of God and Saints of Christ, and he claimed that he had visions that God told him that Black people were the descendants of the 12 lost tribes of Israel. Much of what they saw in the Bible about being put into slavery really resonated with some of these individuals, and they found it a point of kind of kinship. So who are the 12 lost tribes of Israel? Just a very basic introduction from my perspective. The 12 lost tribes, which are going to come up frequently this morning, are the people who took possession of Canaan after the death of Moses. They were named for the sons of Jacob, and the 10 tribes formed the kingdom of Israel after the death of Solomon, and then the other 2 formed something called the kingdom of Judah. The 10 tribes were then scattered after the kingdom of Israel was conquered by the Assyrians, and this resulted in them being assimilated into other people and nations. The 2 tribes of the kingdom of Judah were permitted back to Israel after the Babylonian exile, but all the descendants of these 12 tribes came to be known as Jews in some way. Various groups over the years have claimed to be the descendants of the 10 or 12 tribes of Israel, and so the Black Hebrew Israelites are just one example of a group claiming that these are their ancestors. Crowdy's church still continues today. It's led by Chief Rabbi McNeil at Temple Beth El. And there are also other groups that you might have heard of, like the African Hebrew Israelite Nation of Jerusalem, which is based in Dimona in Israel. But the distinction to make with these groups and other Black Hebrew Israelite organizations is that they are not denying the Jewishness of Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Mizrahi, or other Jews. These individuals are Black and they see themselves as Israelites of African descent. However, the people that we need to be concerned about, the extremists that we're going to focus on today, they believe they are the only true descendants of the 12 tribes, and that the white presenting Jews of today, as they describe them, are actually imposters. So let's turn our attention to some of the groups that are of the kind of gravest concern to us in the US right now. These extreme Black Hebrew Israelites who are promoting anti-Semitism, anti-white, anti-LGBT, and misogynist rhetoric on the streets of the United States and across multiple social media platforms. The first one is the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. They're based in Pennsylvania, established in 2006, and are a registered nonprofit organization in several states. The Sakari Hebrew Israelites are based in San Diego, California, led by somebody called Adnoy Glaub, who is known as the Guerrilla Hebrew. And then we have the IUIC, Israel United in Christ, who you'll hear me reference several times today. This is one of the most prominent US organizations, founded by a person called Bishop Nathaniel in Coney Island in New York in 2003. They have 70 YouTube channels. They have a presence in the UK, Germany, Belize, Liberia, and Jamaica, and they even have a Roku channel to live stream their television channel. So this is a group that we're particularly concerned about that I'll talk about more. And then finally, we have the Great Millstone. It's a much more loosely organized movement in the US. Again, they use YouTube extensively, showing their street preaching, but they're also active in places like the Virgin Islands and even Australia. So I highlight these 4 groups in particular as being significant, but there are others that exist. It's very challenging to gauge how many people belong to extreme Black Hebrew Israelite movements. A small 2019 poll that sampled 1,000 African Americans suggested that 4% of them identify as Black Hebrew Israelite, but then within that will be a very small subsection who identify with this more extremist ideology. We can see from our research that social media channels that they have tens of thousands of followers, and groups such as the IUIC have led large marches in places like New York City, recently in Brooklyn to the Barclays Center. So it does seem to suggest that there are at least hundreds of people who consider themselves members of some of these organizations. So this presentation is going to contain various videos as well. It's impossible for me to subtitle them, but I've tried to pull out some of the key text on the sides, and I'll kind of talk about the content after we've watched them. So hopefully your speakers are turned up loud so we can hear the content. This video shows the perspective from somebody's apartment looking down on the streets of Brooklyn as a large group of the IUIC members are chanting, "You are the real Jews, and that's the good news," as they approach the Barclays Center in support of Kyrie Irving, the NBA player who was suspended following his tweet about that film, which I'll discuss. So we can see they have quite a militant aesthetic, and clearly there's a large volume of people dressed in matching uniforms marching through the streets here. So why were they going to the Barclays Center? Well, the NBA Nets player Kyrie Irving tweeted out a link to a pseudo-academic documentary in 2018 that was made by extreme Black Hebrew Israelites, and this garnered national attention and resulted in his suspension. And so the IUIC chose to march to the arena where he plays to show their support for him. I think this was one of the rare opportunities where we've had public figures coming out and in support of this, and so this movement really latched on to Irving and Ye West to try and maximize the publicity. This film here, it contends that Sephardic, Ashkenazi, and Mizrahi Jews are religious converts with no blood connection to the ancient 12 tribes of Israel. It promotes Holocaust denial and claims Hitler believed that Negroes were the real Jews. Despite multiple requests to remove it, Amazon continues to rent and sell this documentary and its accompanying book. I've watched it, so you don't have to. It is 3.5 hours long, but it really is a very sophisticated piece of work in presenting this ideology in a consumable format for individuals who are interested. So let's dive a bit more into the kind of belief system of the extreme end of this spectrum. So what do they believe? Well, they reject what we might consider to be the accepted history of Christianity, Judaism, and the Jewish people. They claim that Black Americans are the true descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel, and therefore these are God's chosen people. And some of the groups, particularly the IUIC, believe that Native Americans and Hispanics are also included within this. So we can see this chart ascribes kind of modern nations back to these ancient tribes. They believe that the true children of Israel, the descendants of these tribes, have been scattered across the globe, that they were driven into slavery and they were forced to accept other religions such as Christianity. They believe the Bible prophesies that the true Israelites have been displaced from their homeland and cursed to suffer atrocities. But they trust they will receive salvation as the chosen people if they return to their Hebrew roots. adherents often point to Deuteronomy 28 as evidence for this prophecy, and they consider it their duty to inform other descendants of their lineage, hence the great focus on things like street preaching to get the word out there. So some of the passages in Deuteronomy, which they evidence as kind of fact for their beliefs, shown on the screen here. The first one talks about their sons and daughters going into captivity. The second one talks about those curses that I mentioned. They believe that these curses are applicable only to Black people and a punishment for breaking the commandments. And then finally, the last verses there talk about going into slavery, about going to Egypt with ships. The mention of ships means that they believe this refers to the transatlantic slave trade. So let's take a moment to watch a short video from one of the hundreds of lessons that the IUIC has uploaded online. They primarily use YouTube to transmit their teachings to what they call camps in over 70 locations in the US. And as you'll see, they'll rely heavily on their own interpretation of scripture to evidence their claims.
Over to verse 68.
Verse 68.
Yep.
And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again.
Egypt means slavery, because if you follow the Bible, you know anything about biblical history. The Israelites, the Jews, were in slavery under Pharaoh in Egypt. And that's why Moses said, let my people go. So going into Egypt means slavery. But how would they go into slavery? Read.
With ships.
The real Jews would go into slavery on ships. Read on.
By the way whereof I spake unto thee.
So it wouldn't be by a train. You wouldn't go from Germany to Poland to Auschwitz on a train. It would be by a ship. Thus saith the Lord. Read.
Thou shalt see it no more again.
You won't see it, meaning your homeland, again. So how is it some people that are saying they are the Jews when God said you won't see your homeland again? Remember, we'll get to it. Keep reading.
And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies.
When was the Jewish people ever sold as slaves? When they got off the ship.
So you can see in this short section, they obviously reference some of the biblical scriptures that I mentioned, but their anti-Semitic perspective is very evident. They dismiss the historic connection of Jewish people to the land of Israel and refer to them simply as Jewish, in inverted commas, implying that they're imposters. And as Ye's tweet suggested earlier, these BHI extremists, they claim they can't be anti-Semitic because they believe themselves to be the true Semites. So, and as I mentioned, another tactic popular with some of these groups is the practice of street preaching. And you may have seen some of them if you've been into major metropolitan areas like Times Square in New York City. They do street preaching. They set up with posters and speakers and work together using the Bible to kind of confront members of the population who are walking past. They always tend to record this kind of activity, and they'll put it on social media like YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok to reach a wider audience. So we'll take a moment to listen to this speaker from the Sakari Hebrew Israelites as he explains his what I consider to be anti-Semitic beliefs, contending that Jews have stolen the identity and culture of who they consider to be the true Jewish people.
That Jewish people run Philly. Jewish people run New York. As quiet as it's kept, they run LA too. Right? All these main places niggas think they got it at, Amalek run that. And he runs where you live, and he stole your identity, he stole your nationality, he stole your land, he stole the Torah. He done took your culture and like made some whack-ass version of it. You see what I'm saying?
So a little challenging to hear because someone drives their car back at an inconvenient moment. But what is this individual saying? Well, he says that Jewish people run Philadelphia, New York and Los Angeles. So he's promoting that traditional anti-Semitic stereotype and conspiracy that Jewish people somehow run the world through control of institutions, through government, law enforcement, and media. Then he says something. He says, Amalek run that. He stole your identity, your nationality, your land, and the Torah. The Amalekites mentioned in the Bible are the descendants of Amalek, who he references. And this was the first nation to seek the total destruction of the Israelites after the Exodus from Egypt, and are viewed as the kind of genocide-seeking enemy of the Jews. So he is using the term Amalek to refer to who we would consider to be the Jewish people today. These most extremist believers argue that today's Jewish people, including Israelis, they are not descendants of biblical Jacob, but they call them descendants of Esau, also known as Edomites. And Amalek is one of the children of Esau. And as a result, the Black Hebrew Israelites then consider the Jews of today to be enemies of the true Israelites. They believe that these are false Jews who are just white people who have deliberately usurped or stolen the true identity of people of color. So part of their belief that those that we consider to be Jewish today are imposters is also based in more interpretation of biblical scripture, particularly passages from Revelation. This poster on the left again comes from the IUIC, and it features a scripture from Revelation 2:9 stating, I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. This is not something new. This passage and passages like it has been a long-standing cornerstone of anti-Semitism, even used medieval Christian theological anti-Semitism. And what do? They take the passage literally and without the appropriate context. In reality, the term synagogue here is actually referring to an assembly of people or a congregation rather than a Jewish temple. And they use the term Satan to refer to an enemy or an adversary. So it's not specifically referring to people who follow the Jewish faith. The context for this passage at the time was referring to a group of Jews who had been encouraged by their teachers to oppose early Christianity, but they extrapolate out this passage and use it to suggest that the Bible says that Jews participate in a synagogue of Satan. So let's see how this scripture kind of manifests in their teachings and their beliefs. This is a short promo video that was shared around the same time that Kyrie Irving was suspended by the NBA.
Here in America, it is said to the blacks and Hispanics, you are not God's chosen people. They don't call you the Jews. They don't call you Israelites. The Bible says in that same place where they told you you are not the children of God, there it will be told you that you are the children of God.
So let's see what the Bible says. Come on, read that again. Which say they are Jews and are not. The Bible says somebody's calling themselves Jews, but they're really not the Jews. What are they then? But are the synagogue of Satan. They the what? The synagogue of Satan. Is that the what? The synagogue of Satan. Woo, boy.
So you can see that they aggressively utilize this scripture in their preaching and even film a religious Jewish man as he's attending a basketball game over in Los Angeles, turning his eyes red. This approach is not solely the property of extreme Black Hebrew Israelites. We do see the adherents of something called Christian identity, which is a white supremacist movement with links to neo-Nazism. They allege that actually white Aryan people are the true Israelites. But like the extreme BHI believers, they also contend that Jews are imposters and are the children of Satan. This is an image that comes from a Christian identity group laying out some of their beliefs and their evidence for why the Aryan race would be the descendants of the tribes. And you can see on the right side that they have a list too, where they ascribe modern nations to these various tribes, more Caucasian or white countries like Sweden, Denmark, things that they call white Spain and white Italy, and also the UK, the USA, and even as far-flung as Iceland. There's been a knock-on effect from the statements that Ye West has been sharing, beyond the fact that his social media following at the time was more numerous than the world's Jewish population. We've also seen white supremacist groups taking what he has said to promote their own anti-Semitic agenda. This is images of Goyim Defense League, who I mentioned earlier, the neo-Nazi group founded in California, who do the banner drops and the U-Haul tour. They put banners on a freeway in Los Angeles, and you can see it says, "Kanye is right about the Jews." And then this sign down here referencing Revelation 3:9, "Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan." And you can also see them giving Nazi salutes in this video. Similarly, the Nation of Islam leader, Louis Farrakhan, he's also charged that Jews are not the real Jews, that they are deceiving and sending the United States to hell. And so it's interesting to see that this anti-Semitic trope is running through all three of these movements, despite their otherwise highly conflicting ideologies. And so, as I'm sure you're unfortunately aware, Jewish people tend to be the mutual enemy of varied extremist movements. So in December 2022, a video circulated on Twitter of another extreme BHI demonstration held by members of the Sakari Hebrew Israelites, again outside the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. And this particular video followed Ye West's appearance alongside a fellow anti-Semite, Nicholas Fuentes, on longtime conspiracy theorist Alex Jones's InfoWars show. And I'm sure you've seen clips of Ye West dressed in a full body black mask, praising Adolf Hitler. So let's take a moment to listen to this speaker and see the influence that those words had on this organization.
What about that?
Why don't I feel good about what Kanye is saying?
Both of them and Kyrie, what they got going on.
Well, I'll talk mainly about Kanye. I mean,
right, what about Kanye? Why you don't feel good about what he's saying?
And he's praising...
You're half Jewish.
Yes, and he's praising Hitler, saying the Nazis were cool, and saying the Holocaust didn't happen.
Yeah, no, we support Hitler.
Right. All of you?
Yeah. Because Hitler was killing your people, man. Hitler knew who the real Jews was. Right? Hitler wasn't oppressing my people. He was coming for your nuts.
Holy
right? And let me give you a wake-up call, man. You're not a Jew. You're not Jew, right? You're the seed of the devil, man. Right? These brothers on these platforms, Kanye and Kyrie, shaking things up. It's because it's a great awakening happening, right? The real Jews are back on the streets, and you so-called fake Jews who stole our identity are going to go into slavery, right? Because you're not a Jew, right?
Did the Holocaust happen?
It did happen, and we're glad that it happened.
Okay, so a lot of statements coming through there thick and fast, but overall we can hear that the speaker is agreeing with much of what Ye West has said, claiming that Hitler knew who the real Jews were, and that the person speaking to them in the video, the Jewish person behind the camera, is the seed of the devil. It's also important to note that the speaker states that these fake Jews will go into slavery, that some sort of great awakening coming, and that he was glad that the Holocaust happened. You can also hear him as a moment where he refers to the Jewish person as Esau too, so we can see all these things coming together. Similarly, a music video released in November 2022 was titled DEFCON 4 by artist Natazab, and it features members of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge and unfortunately numerous anti-Semitic tropes. Natazab is in the middle there. He's a Sacramento-based rapper, and clearly the title is inspired by Kanye's tweet about going DEFCON 3. Some of the lyrics include, "You're the synagogue of Satan with those black hats, your whole nation are sitting ducks." And he also charges that Jews make millions off our culture and black people suffer from it. So let's take a moment to listen to some of the music.
We were slaves in America like we was in Egypt. Y'all don't even fit the curses in the Torah neither. Y'all was blind to the truth. I had to make it clear how Jerusalem, your land, your people came from Europe. That was 1947. Your menorah got 9 sticks. It's really only 7. Yeah, it's us against the world. Armageddon. This what happened when you inherit lies from your ancestors. Y'all the synagogue of Satan with them black hats. Your whole nation sitting ducks, Aflacs, bunch of thieves and culture vultures. Ain't nothing kosher. To tell the truth, you vagabonds don't have a culture.
And the video features obviously the scripture again from Revelation 2:9. Some of the folks who adhere to this kind of ideology believe that those who are presenting themselves as Jewish today are actually maybe Europeans rather than Israelites. And as a result, many of them also promote anti-white beliefs, portraying white people as the devil. And so this is particularly evident in several videos uploaded to YouTube by the Sakari Hebrew Israelites, where we've already heard street preachers referring to white people as devils. This is a screenshot of a video interview with the Chicago leader of ISUPK, Captain Mawakad, and he states, "There is nothing that gives me more pleasure on earth than saying that the white man is the devil, because it is the absolute truth." He also goes on to claim that white people are responsible for allowing homosexuality to proliferate across the earth. And these posters from other groups like Great Millstone really show the beliefs of this movement. They believe, like the speaker in the video said, that a great awakening is coming, and eventually white people and Jewish imposters will be forced to pay for their crimes, and they will experience the curses that Black people have suffered, such as slavery. And we can see these individuals, even including white babies, being shackled and under the control of this Black Hebrew Israelite. BHI, the Black Hebrew Israelite adherents, also believe that Jesus wasn't white, that he was Black, which, you know, ethnically may have some basis in reality, but whilst they believe that he was not ethnically white, the manner in which they portray the white images of Jesus is rather problematic. They reference various pieces again from the Bible, which talk about people having brassy skin and woolly hair as evidence that they were Black. As I mentioned, there's also a robust anti-LGBTQ sentiment amongst extreme BHI believers. This image from YouTube was used to advertise an episode of the IUIC Tallahassee's radio show targeting the LGBT community, specifically in June, which is Pride Month. One member from the ISUPK Killeen, which is in Texas, they compared a child-friendly drag event to the murder of children in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas in May 2022, saying that it is the spirit that wants to hunt and murder children. He insists that the oppressor, which I think we can all assume probably means imposter Jews, is trying to drag children into this wicked culture, which they consider to be an abomination. And finally, another video from the ISUPK Staten Island refers to the LGBTQ community as a plague intended to destroy the Lord's chosen people. Again, we see crossover with the white supremacist movement there, who believe that members of the LGBT community threaten the existence of their race because they don't necessarily proliferate children in the same format. So they fear for their genetic descendants. And finally, misogynist rhetoric is another cornerstone of this ideology. The extreme BHI religious doctrine, it places God above man and man above a woman. One video from the ISUPK features a street preacher advocating for polygamy. He contends there are only weak men left, so they need to go and marry 7 or 8 women so that our women can have a strong man. He goes on to argue that women are made to be soft and delicate. Another video titled ISUPK turns LGBTQ members straight implies that sexual identity is a choice and that their rhetoric is some sort of remedy. Another video from the IUIC in Queens in New York refers to the Bible as asserting that women who wear pants are an abomination against God and that men should make the rules in a household. They also claim that a husband takes the role of God in a house over a wife. Another video claims that households in Europe are dysfunctional because women take a leading role in them against the will of God. And we can see in this image here, an extreme Black Hebrew Israelite lording over women of all races, claiming they will bow down to the Black man, even using a racial slur to refer to a Black woman who attempts to push back against this misogynistic hierarchy. So, what are some of the consequences of this type of ideology? Is it merely the rhetoric that is remaining the property of a fringe community? But if we look at some simple data from a search of Google Trends, which records interest in particular search terms over time, specifically using the Google search engine, you can see that this is a search for the term, or for the phrase, "Are Black people the real Jews?" And it indicates with this peak over here in October that this type of rhetoric, exposure to this rhetoric, certainly increased over that period when Ye West was making his most inflammatory statements. And it's interesting that they even break down interest by region, and we can see that New York and Florida were particular hotbeds for this search term. Google has worked hard to downlist many of the extreme Black Hebrew Israelite websites and social media platforms that I've just mentioned. So if you're to search for terms pertaining to this area, the more extreme content won't come up, which certainly is limiting exposure on Google to this content. However, I think the trends show us that people are certainly becoming more interested in this topic during this time and may have migrated to explore some of the content that I've shown today. So what should we be concerned about? Are there violent components to the extreme Black Hebrew Israelites? Certainly, I think we can all agree from the content that I've shown, there is a militant aesthetic to some of the more prominent groups, particularly the IUIC, as shown by their marches, their matching uniforms, and this language that they use to describe the impending reckoning that white people and Jewish imposters will face as Black people are recognized as the true Israelites and return to their homeland. We do know that several people who appeared to support or espouse extreme Black Hebrew Israelite beliefs have been responsible for several attacks and murders in the US in recent years, most notably 2 incidents that both happened in December 2019. In Jersey City, New Jersey, 4 people were killed at a kosher supermarket after being targeted by 2 individuals motivated by anti-Semitic beliefs that were fueled by this extreme BHI ideology. The perpetrators also had a bomb in their van that could have killed or wounded people in a range of 5 football fields. One of the perpetrators left postings on social media, which you can see on the screen here, referencing some of the scriptures that we discussed today. You can see direct reference to Revelation 2:9 in the top post, calling Jews imposters and referring to them as the synagogue of Satan and Amalek. The second post suggests there's a bigger Jewish conspiracy at hand that is responsible for controlling the actions of law enforcement, and that he sees this war as having no end. So that might suggest why he chose to take the actions that he did. Then later that month, in Monsey, New York, 5 Jewish people were wounded in a stabbing attack at the home of Rabbi Chaim Rottenberg, who later died of his injuries. The perpetrator has been deemed incompetent to stand trial and was hospitalized in a mental health facility, but he had expressed extreme Black Hebrew Israelite beliefs in his journals and internet searches leading up to this attack, as evidenced by this FBI affidavit, stating that Hebrew Israelites took from the powerful people and questioning why people mourn for anti-Semitism when there is Semitic genocide. So, in conclusion, whilst extreme Black Hebrew Israelites may represent only a small portion of American society, it is clear that they are posing anti-Semitism in a virulent and palatable way to a broader audience. Their use of social media is comprehensive and sophisticated, and they only serve to fan the pre-existing flames of Jewish hatred that we unfortunately are seeing rising further. A recent statement from the FBI director, Christopher Wray, shared an alarming statistic that whilst Jews make up only 2.4% of the population in the United States, anti-Semitism is the motivating factor in 63% of all religious-based hate crimes. Now, I want to reiterate again that specifically the extreme Black Hebrew Israelites are a subsection of our society, that Black Jews, people of color in general, don't necessarily adhere to this ideology. And so it's important that we're mindful of identifying those which do. It's alarming to us that this content is allowed to remain online, and we continue to lobby and work with social media platforms to remove it. The Museum of Tolerance will certainly continue to spread education and awareness through our Museum of Tolerance programming, and working with local and federal government, law enforcement agencies and educators and students to warn about the dangers of online extremism and the threats posed by movements like this. If you see individuals like this preaching in the streets, I would not recommend that you go and engage with them. If you see content that concerns you in real life or online, you can report it directly to our research department using the email on the screen down here that's been on every slide, ireport@wiesenthal.com. So that concludes my presentation, and I will gladly answer any questions or discuss any comments that anyone might have. Thank you.
One question I'd like to ask is, with these BHIs, over what period of time have they mobilized in this country or beyond?
Well, the extreme ones, I think, probably in the last few decades have become more prominent. The general movement that I wouldn't consider to be dangerous began like in the 1890s, but certainly in the last couple of decades, I think we've seen the extreme ones coming to the forefront. And like all extremist movements in America, I think they've been bolstered by access to social media. So it's given them access to new audiences in a way they never had before.
Okay, thank you. What role does the media play in espousing these views and the opinions of these groups?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something that we have been grappling with, because on the one hand, it's important that we spread awareness of things that are going on in our society. On the other hand, if I take, for example, Kanye West's interview on Alex Jones' InfoWars, Alex Jones has been deplatformed by all the major social media platforms. So you won't find his content for the most part on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, those sorts of spaces. But after Kanye appeared on the InfoWars show, lots of people posted the clips of his interview back to those mainstream platforms. So it inadvertently, I think, gave greater exposure to an interview that perhaps wouldn't have had the same kind of attention. So I think there's a balance to be struck between kind of raising awareness and providing people with information versus I think kind of glorifying or highlighting this content in a way that gives it far more credence and space than it deserves. Okay.
Anyone on the call with a particular question, you can unmute yourself at this time.
I think James had a question first, and then
yeah, the mapping project is particularly disturbing because it's creating a repository of individuals, as far as I can understand, of individuals who, in the least way, associated with Judaism in a positive manner. It seems to me very, very disturbing. And I'm wondering if you can direct me to some kind of place where I can get more information on it. There was an article in I live in Massachusetts, Northeast Massachusetts. And last summer, I believe it was, in the Jewish Journal, there was a very brief article about this. I'm wondering if you can direct me to a place where I could get more information about it in order to, if somebody questions me about it, to give them a more informed and factual description.
Yeah, certainly. I can probably maybe send some links to Norwin to share with you. I'm confident that the Anti-Defamation League, maybe the Southern Poverty Law Center, will have more extensive content about the project. I do know that yesterday there was an article suggesting that the mapping project might be partly or wholly created by some sort of Iranian agency, which would kind of make sense. So there's more and more discussion of it, I think, in mainstream places. But it is something that we're highly concerned about because, as you said, it basically piles all Jewish people into one bucket and accuses them of horrific crimes that, it only takes one individual to utilize that information in a nefarious way. So
right. Very. This mapping project is, to me anyway, very, very disturbing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Bob, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. I'd be very interested about, I think you touched on this briefly about Ye and Alex Jones, but what the dynamic is or relationship between the black groups and the white supremacist or white nationalist groups. I mean, they have, anti-Semites of the world unite, but I mean, the rhetoric of the white nationalist groups is also racist. So, I don't think they'd care for Jews, black or white. So, I wondered if there's any connections or, dynamic between those different groups.
Yeah, I think we all thought it was rather peculiar to see Nick Fuentes teaming up with Ye West, but I don't know. I think to some extent they're focusing on their greatest enemy together. Lots of these groups also potentially believe in the idea of like ethnic segregation. So your land for your people and my land for my people. So just because they're appearing together doesn't mean that they want to live in harmony together. They may have other kind of plans about how each culture would have their own space. I think Fuentes is very media savvy and knows what will catch people's attention. And so I think that is one of the reasons why he's chose to engage with Ye West. It's given him, I think, an unprecedented amount of publicity. And Alex Jones, I think his modus operandi is to cause the most damage possible. And certainly I think him inviting those two people together was very much in keeping with his style. So I think there's no like logical explanation as to why seemingly disparate movements come together, other than unfortunately I think they see a mutual enemy that they could perhaps be greater as a united front against than in their separate parts.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this excellent and very thorough presentation. I just wonder what your thoughts are, the center's thoughts are on the effectiveness of the street preaching.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, anecdotally, when I see it happen, people just kind of walk past and ignore it. I think the difference that I've seen is that the street preaching can be recorded and spread to a wider audience. So, 20 years ago, you would have only impacted the 100 people who walked past you. Now they got access to, potentially hundreds of thousands of people. I think street preaching is quite a confrontational manner of delivering their messaging, and you can see in some of their videos that they are actively targeting people from minority groups to try and get a reaction from them as well. So I think it's quite interesting because it gives a veneer of legitimacy by standing there and using the Bible. That I think that anti-Semitism belies. So I think it's a tactic that kind of has localized and also greater ramifications.
Thank you. By the way, I think the justification for the connection between those two disparate groups, there's a Chinese proverb, the Chinese philosophy, that the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something there. Dave.
Are these groups all male?
Great question. So as I mentioned, they are highly misogynistic. So they have women that have like participatory roles in some of the groups, but they certainly play a subservient position in the organization. So the women that I've seen tend to be heralded as kind of homemakers, as stand-up examples of what a Black woman should be like. They'll participate in kind of religious ceremonies and things like that, but they don't play a role in the kind of converting process. Yeah, James.
So the women are basically subservient participants? Is that what would you characterize them in that manner?
Yeah. I think it's similar to the white supremacist cause in many ways, that they have a very traditional opinion of gender roles and marriage, and the woman falls into the subservient end of that spectrum. So Lord knows what they would make of me.
The same groups that used to preach in the 1970s and 1980s on the Manhattan street corners.
Yeah, I think there was a kind of larger organization that has fragmented in some way, whose name is escaping me right now, but I think there was kind of a portion called something like the Great Redeemer, and some of them split off. I think that the group itself was far less radical and more kind of accepting, and then a more militant sect split off from that and kind of maybe evolved into what we're seeing now. Marty.
Yes, very good presentation, Emily. It was a topic I was not really completely familiar with. And I'm glad that you have this education. One of my questions are, I know that we have Black communities in Ethiopia, in Kenya, etc., that completely embrace the Jewish Torah and all the 613 commandments. Are you seeing any embracement of true Judaism in these groups where they're really accepting and following all the commandments?
And not my area of expertise, unfortunately. So I couldn't speak to that. If you're unless you're referring to other extreme Black Hebrew Israelites.
Yes.
Okay. You know, as I said at the top, I'm not Jewish, so I'm not entirely familiar with what that would look like. But they have they celebrate Passover, they celebrate Purim, all sorts of different Jewish festivals. I think one video I watched recently was kind of mocking dietary laws surrounding kosher and not mixing meat and milk. So I'm not sure if they adhere to that kind of part of Judaism. So I would say that it's not that they're following what we would consider to be maybe typical Judaism, just with a different belief system as to why they're Jewish. I think they do also kind of veer off from some of the teachings that maybe typical Jews would follow.
Yeah, because it was disturbing if they went after a kosher Jewish market, which is something that they would need to support, their beliefs if they were following it. It's doing just the opposite.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that it was white off.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that their beliefs surrounding kosher kind of industry in particular, I suspect that they maybe see that as some sort of financial product of an imposter Jew system, rather than it being a reflection of biblical teaching. So,
in the interest of time and the fact that Emily got up with the chickens this morning in Southern California, it's only 5 after 8 there, so I guess you can go back to sleep. But
any more to do today?
In any event, we'd like to thank you on behalf of the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs for presenting this morning. A very timely, informative, and provocative program. And if any of those individuals on the call feel that they'd like to know more or pass this information on to their synagogues or respective men's clubs, let us know and we will make that happen. We will have another program next month, topic to be determined. And I'd like to thank everyone again for participating this morning. And thank you to Emily.
If anyone is in the New York City area, the week of or the days of March 19th and March 20th, we're going to have 2 community forums in New York City with a former leader of the National Socialist Movement speaking, and myself and a colleague will be there to share our research. So I'm happy to share those flyers with Norwin for anyone who might be interested once I have them. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. We hope to have you back at another time when you have another presentation or an update on what we've discussed this morning.
There's certainly no shortage of material, unfortunately.
That's for sure. Okay. Everyone
Thank
have a
you,
good
everyone.
day. Have a good day, and thank you for joining us this morning.